Hey, everyone, welcome back to another edition of PD and PDubs Unscripted. PDubs, good to be with you.
Hey, great to be back in the studio, PD. What a beautiful week it's been, and it's great to be back in a regular routine here on our podcast.
Yeah, and so today's a very special day on PD and PDubs Unscripted because thanks to Andy Liebold and Dave Brazel, we now have the ability to bring in guests remotely to our podcast.
I know, this is really opening up a big avenue for us to bring in many guests.
Right, and so we didn't want to start small, do somebody in the state of Illinois or even in Iowa or Wisconsin or some nearby.
Even in the United States.
Even the United States.
Yeah.
So we have a very special guest live from Slovakia, Pastor Scott Yount, one of my best friends and a great brother in ministry, joining us here today. And we've been praying for Scotty here at Emmanuel as he was serving in Ukraine and now had to go flee for safety to Slovakia. So, Scotty, good to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I think this is really maybe the first time you met maybe Pastor Warren. I can't remember when you visited with Lena to come to, when we went downtown to Chicago, if Pastor was in the office that day when we stopped by Emmanuel.
I kind of remember greeting you, but it was a while ago, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, so
that was quite a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great to meet you again if we've met already, and but thank you for being so willing to join us on like our initial launch of remote guests, and boy, you're making a big splash for us, man.
Well, yeah, my pleasure, and thanks for having me. And I'll try my best to make it a worthwhile investment to prep for that remote all that work you did prepping to have remote guests.
Yeah, you're going to set that bar high. I don't know if anybody can follow the bar you're going to set here. But Scott, you want to tell us a little bit about you? I mean, I've known you now since 2007 when we started in seminary.
Yeah, that was Concordia, St. Louis, 2007, and I grew up in the Sacramento, California area. Had gone to Azusa Pacific University and was a biblical studies major there. Mostly was familiar with that university through their Mexico mission outreach that we used to go on mission trips with them. When I was in high school, doing vacation Bible schools for children in Mexico. And I knew they had a football program, and I wanted to play some football while I was in university. And so that's kind of how I wound up there. But wanted to get, as I was prepping for being a pastor, more of that Lutheran education. And so decided on Concordia, St. Louis. And that's where was in the same class as Donald, so same dorm.
Yeah, you lived a floor above me that first year.
So back to the football.
What was that?
I'm not a light person, so I don't walk very light.
Oh, were you always like hitting the ceiling and saying,
I think you lived on the other. Like, I don't think you were above me. I think Matt's room was above me. You lived
okay.
But then our second year we were neighbors, which I probably hung out more in your room than my room.
Yeah, that's right.
That was where the rock band went on, was in your room.
Oh, you guys played rock band too? Wow, that must be a seminary thing. I was the oldest guy in my group.
And yeah, Scotty was our excellent singer for our rock band with Matt, Jake, and myself in seminary.
Nice. Well, I was interested in the football at Azusa. Did you make the team?
Yeah, I walked on my first year there. I did 2 years of junior college, so I transferred as a junior.
Okay.
And walked on, and I did play 2 years there. And
what was your position?
Really good my first year when I didn't play, and then the second year when I played, we weren't so good.
Oh, okay. Were you a linebacker or?
I played nose guard.
Nose guard. Okay.
Yeah, we were good my first year when I didn't play very much, and then my second year when I actually got to play, we weren't as good. But it did play both years against the University of San Diego, and Jim Harbaugh was their coach. And we beat them the first year. And then the second year, was it Josh Johnson was their quarterback? I know he went to the NFL. I just remember I was nose guard, so every time they hiked the ball, I could just immediately run to the sideline, and their quarterback was so fast, I never even got close to catching him.
I was going to ask, did you have any sacks against him? Because I know your crazy speed there, Scotty. That was deceptive in flag football.
No, I didn't have a prayer. We beat him my first year there. Second year, I think we lost by probably around 30.
Oof.
Well, that kind of sounds like how we fared in Concordia basketball, the Kingsmen against the Preachers. I was the coach in 2009, and we came down to St. Louis, and you guys whomped us pretty badly. But I remember I was like a player coach, so I went in there and I took a charge and hit the deck, man, and I thought it was going to turn the tide for us, but no such thing. I think the refs were kind of homers.
Oh, I don't know. We were probably at that game, Scotty, because I think we went to most of the Suns basketball games.
Yeah, we didn't win a game.
I think went to most of them.
Especially when they played Fort Wayne, because we had to cheer on Matt and Will the Thrill.
Yeah, well, then I think my fourth year, I decided to play. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that would have been 2011.
2010, 11.
2010, 11.
Yeah, we had to let the crazy train out on the basketball court.
So were you displaying some Mitch Richmond skills?
Not really. I think more. I don't know if there's a player like maybe a Charles Barkley that couldn't dunk or have any offensive skills, but
Scotty,
really good at charging people.
I think you were the Mikey Moore of our basketball team.
Well, Scotty.
Okay. Yeah.
My favorite story that I've told Donald about our team is we had a bunch of guys who'd never played basketball before, any sport. And there was this one guy, Vince, and I'm like, Vince, you got to be like a tiger when you're playing defense, just be in front of the guy and be like a tiger. And he's like, okay, coach, okay. And so they go out, and Vince is, guarding this guy, and he's roaring like a lion. He's like, rawr, rawr, rawr. And I'm like, what in the world? He took it literally. I'm like, I didn't mean you had to roar at the guys. It just be like ferocious like a tiger. Well, I was just doing what you told me, coach. And so, yeah, we never won a game.
Yeah, what would have you done if somebody came up to you playing defense and roared at you like a tiger?
I think that might have gotten my head. I don't know. I might have been a little scared of that player.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, good times at seminary playing basketball.
For sure.
Even all the intramurals and softball with you, Scotty, as you were a proud member of the Pelagian Pelicans and the Canaanite Fighting Caterpillars.
I love the names.
Great. Great.
Those are good times.
Yeah, that was with our good buddy Justin, a.k.a. Buzz, who Pastor met and went to a Suns game with Buzz and myself earlier this year. And so, Scotty, so ever since I've known you, because I think when did you start to go to Ukraine, and explain how that even happened, like those mission trips you took to Ukraine.
Yeah, my first time going was summer of 2007. And I kind of tell people the only reason I ever wound up going to Ukraine was because somebody stole my car. I was, again, my last year at Azusa Pacific University. And in fact, I had already graduated in December, but I couldn't start a seminary until the fall of the next year. So I was just kind of living on a friend's couch and auditing some Greek classes. And it was my day for the carpool to drive. And I remember waking up and kind of searching every street, like, where did I park? I cannot remember. And after
must have been a rough night.
Yeah. after about 30 minutes, couldn't find the car and realized I think somebody stole it.
Wow.
And, a few weeks went by, the police never found it. And when the insurance gave us a check for some of the value of the car, my dad said, well, Scott, why don't you come home and we'll look for something together. So I went from Azusa back to Sacramento, and it just happened that weekend. When I normally would have been away at university, we had a guest speaker, a missionary, sharing about Ukraine. And I could just remember hearing her talk about camps for children with special needs and this vacation Bible school, and kind of thought, well, I can't start really till fall, and my summer should be free if I pass all the entry exams into seminary. So I kind of said, you know what, Lord, I'm just going to sign up to go and just pray that all that will work out. And I'm so glad and thankful that it did. And so that was, I think, summer 2007, first time I went to Ukraine to help at the camp for children with special needs, and doing a lot of work with people in wheelchairs, stroke victims, kind of that kind of ministry.
That's awesome. I mean, I know you shared that story. I know you shared that story when you came on the gathering place once, but it's just an amazing story thinking, who would have thought like your car being stolen led to you going to Ukraine, and now look at where it's taken you.
No. I don't think I would have been able to point to Ukraine on a map at that time. But when she was talking about it, I said, oh, well, why not?
Right. Just answering that call of God, and look at where it's taken you, serving there, ultimately meeting your wife, Lena, there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when did you go full-time into Ukraine? Because I know you had your first call to a church in Iowa, right? Kind of near what university?
University of Northern Iowa.
And how far from Field of Dreams were you?
I was like maybe an hour and a half drive, I think, to Dyersville.
That's not bad.
And so I knew, when I went in 2007, I knew I really wanted to go back. But it was hard in seminary, wanting to graduate in a reasonable amount of time. I think I, ended up doing summer school the first few years I was there. But I think just that summer before vicarage, I ended up going again. And then once I got a call as senior pastor, or as an associate pastor, the senior pastor had actually been to Ukraine also with the same ministry. He was my youth director when I was in high school.
Very cool.
And he was actually the one who invited that missionary to come speak at the church. And so he, the church kept supporting me and allowing me to go every summer to help at the camp for children with special needs. And I just kind of knew more and more that I felt just that kind of desire to help with that ministry. And I talked to the senior pastor about it, and he said, why don't you try going for a month and just, if you really feel like that's where God is leading you to serve. And I could remember being there for probably only a week. And there was this phone call that came in. There was a man who lived out in one of the villages. He had cancer, and their family was asking if they could get a wheelchair for him, just so that, in those last few months of his life, he could get some fresh air, get outside. And we go to this small village house, and I remember meeting him. His name was Yvonne, and just kind of took the time probably for the first hour of just listening to him and asking him questions and kind of finding out about his life. And I remember he told me he was a firefighter, and he was actually one of the firefighters that was called in to put out the fires at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
Wow.
When the meltdown happened. And, I think the moment I saw him, I could see, his hands were swollen, his feet were swollen. He was in such pain. And, he had a tumor, maybe the size of a tennis ball, coming out the back of his head.
Oh, wow.
And, you could just see his body was paying a price for what he had done for his country. And he did something so heroic. And here he is, in a village alone, can't even get a wheelchair from the government.
Wow.
Boy, the irony of all of that.
No, and so I just remember opening up the Bible to John chapter 14 with him, and just kind of reading through that Jesus, do not let your hearts be troubled. In my Father's house are many rooms, and I've gone to prepare a place for you, and the promise that I will come back to take you to be with me, and Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I remember just asking him, if he believed that. And just as he said, yeah, I believe, you can almost just see this, peace come over him, even with all that pain, all the things that he was going through, just that power the gospel had in his life. And I think at that moment, I just really just knew that there was such this need for the gospel in Ukraine. And that's, I kind of knew that this is where I would be serving full time.
That's amazing. Wow. What a thing God did there.
Right. So then you went about, what was it, 2015, 2014 full-time over Ukraine?
Yeah. So that whole experience was summer 2013. And I came back, and in September, I announced to the congregation that I would be leaving to serve as a missionary in Ukraine. The next summer, I'd be starting the preparation for that. And I think maybe 2 weeks after I made that announcement is when the protests started in Ukraine, and then the revolution happened that winter. And then in the probably early 2014 is when the war started.
Okay.
And that's when Russia, kind of began invading eastern Ukraine using separatists really, as a cover to invade eastern Ukraine. And so it kind of really quickly went from me telling people, yeah, I'm going to be a missionary in Ukraine, and everyone being like, Ukraine? Now, where's that? Is that Russia? Where's that? And to Ukraine, are you crazy? Why? There's a war there. And so, yeah, when I got there in the summer of 2014, that's the war in the East was going on. It had already settled down a little bit and wasn't as hot a war as it had been earlier in the year. But that, had been going on the whole time that I've been in Ukraine.
Wow. I just can't imagine that. And then you were in the city of what, Bila Cherkva, which was a little south of, I can't think of the big coast. I can't think of the big city there now.
Yeah. So the capital is Kyiv.
Kyiv, yeah.
Yeah. And Bila Cherkva is maybe an hour and a half southwest of the capital. Bila Cherkva means white church, because apparently it was the only thing left after a war that was standing. And so people would say, well, let's meet at the white church. And that's kind of how the city got its name. And, it's probably a city of maybe 180,000 people. A lot of people that would commute to Kyiv and work in Kyiv. And yeah, it's worked there with the ministry, God's Hidden Treasures. That's Nita Hansen was their director and still is. And she was the one I heard speak at our church back in 2007. And again, doing camps for children with special needs, helping get wheelchairs and distributing wheelchairs. And we did some trips to the east of Ukraine to talk with the military to see what needs they had for wheelchairs in the east. And so I was really involved with that for maybe 5.5 years before kind of going on my own and starting Joy for Ukraine and partnering with the Spiritual Orphans Network.
Yeah,
that's really awesome.
How did you become connected to Spiritual Orphans Network? How did that come about?
Yeah, I had known about them. I was a AALC pastor. It's a pretty small Lutheran church body, and that's the home church I grew up in. And the one of our pastors was actually the director of Spiritual Orphans Network for many years, Pastor Bill Moberly. And the church that I knew in Iowa was supporting missionaries in southern Ukraine, in like the Odessa region. And so I had known about Spiritual Orphans Network. I had known Bill Moberly. And so I kind of knew about them. But, as I was in that process of looking for, someone to partner with in terms of raising funds as a missionary and starting this Joy for Ukraine, you kind of just gave them a call. They have a new director, Pastor David Breidenbach, and just talking with him, I just knew it would be, I think, a good fit to be able to begin this partnership and ministry in Ukraine.
Oh, fantastic.
And you want to share a little bit about the stuff like that you've done at the camps there? Because I know, like, seeing all your pictures and how close you've come to some of those campers over the years. Because wasn't one of them like your best man or stood up in your wedding?
Yeah. So we do generally 2 or 3 camps every summer for children with special needs. One is for we do it with an orphanage for boys with special needs. And then we have 2 other camps that we invite a lot of children from, like the Cerebral Palsy Center to come. And I think 2010, I met a youth. He was probably 19 or 20 at the time back in 2010. And he had an operation when he was maybe 7 years old to remove a tumor from his spine. And after that operation, he was left paralyzed from the waist down. Great guy, name was Sergey. And I just remember we were looking at some of the photos on my phone, and he recognized the neighborhood where the host family I was staying with. He's like, "Oh, that's near my neighborhood." And he gave me directions to his house. He says, "You should come visit me." And, we were so busy with ministry and only had a few days there in Ukraine after camp, never had the chance. But the next year when I came, I had saved those directions. And so kind of unannounced a year later, I just showed up at his door. And I think kind of from that moment on, I mean, we've just been really close friends. And yeah, he was the best man at my wedding, and just been so neat to see how much God has worked in his life and how much he's grown. I think the first year he came to camp, he didn't even want to be there. He was so, I guess, ashamed that he had this disability that he didn't want anyone to see him. Like when teachers would come over to his house, he would ask his mom to hide his wheelchair on the balcony. He was that ashamed of it. And probably the 2 years before he came to camp, he had never once left his apartment.
Wow.
And I think just having a camp where he got to be with other children with special needs, you have these, crazy Americans who are doing these silly camp songs and just pouring love on them and sharing about Christ and the gospel. I think just after a week of camp, it just totally transformed him and just that hope into his life. And to see him now as a volunteer at camp, now he's on the Ukrainian national wheelchair fencing team.
Wow.
It's pretty just amazing to see that growth in his life. And, I'm just so thankful that I got to be a small part of that.
Yeah, that's truly awesome stuff that you're doing there.
Yeah, totally life transforming for him. I mean, just what a great story of where he went from being ashamed of his chair to now participating in athletic events and embracing life. Boy, God's really doing a work.
And he actually came here and joined me in Slovakia for a few weeks. It was, so hard especially early on when there was heavy fighting, around Kyiv, and there had been some rocket strikes in Bielitserkva. And so there was just, every day air sirens, and multiple times a day that you were supposed to go into the shelter. And being a man in a wheelchair, he lived on the 7th floor of an apartment building that the elevator, when it's working, even from the first floor to exiting the building, there's probably about 12 steps that you have to go down. And then very poorly paved roads to get to like a neighbor's house where they might be able to at least be on the first floor or go to a basement. And but what they were doing is they were shutting the elevators off in the buildings when the air sirens, they would get stuck. And so his mom would have to help him down 7 flights of stairs to get outside. I mean, every time. And then, you do that for 10 days, 12 days of, just you kind of become numb to it.
Right.
And was thankful that he was able to get a ride. And we picked him up at the border, and he stayed with us for almost a month here at the center before finally the wheelchair fencing team in Ukraine found kind of a spot for him in Germany where they got to be with his coach, and now they're doing training in Germany.
Wow, that's just amazing stuff. And then before we kind of get into more recent things, what's going on with Ukraine and Slovakia where you're at now, tell us a little bit how you met your wife, Lena, because you met her over there. And obviously that was a big part, probably one of the biggest joys you've had being in Ukraine, being able to meet her.
Yeah. As much I could see the joy that's come into my life through my car getting stolen. I joked, even back in when I met her was probably 2000, late 2015, but I would always joke that, Putin introduced us.
Everything's Putin's fault.
Yeah, her family lived in eastern Ukraine, in the Donetsk region, and her hometown, when that war began, was quickly occupied by the Russian, separatists, and so her family ended up fleeing and came to Bielitserkva. So actually, I think they moved to Bielitserkva probably summer 2014, about the same time I did.
Okay.
But I wouldn't meet her till the next year. But I, so this is the second time that she's been a refugee. But I was helping with one of the churches. We had a pastor, Kostya, who has always been a volunteer. He was always one of our would dress up as like Father Frost, Santa Claus in Ukraine, and we'd visit children and bring gifts that children with special needs and people in wheelchairs. And he had asked me if I would help out at his church. They have a seminary, and they had students who were wanting to learn English, and just asking if I'd come to their speaking clubs to be able to talk with them and play some games with them. And one of their pastors, Sergey, his daughter, Lena, was also coming, and she was part of that speaking club, and that's where I met her. And so we would just be playing some board games, maybe singing some songs on the guitar, and just kind of over time got to know her more and more. And I think probably in 2016, we began dating.
Okay, now, important question, because you're not that competitive, right, Scotty?
I'm probably more competitive than I should be.
So did you let her beat you in those board games?
I would probably say not a chance.
Okay. Okay, that's the Scotty I know and love, the competitive nature.
And she probably would not want to hear that you let her, win. So
That's
that was a
right.
very
She's
good
always
answer.
me.
Yeah.
She's like, "Did you let me win, or did I actually win?" And I always have to tell her, "No, you won fair and square."
Because she knows the true Scotty and the hatred of losing there.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to getting shotgun in the front seat of the car.
Yeah. I poor Donald's car. I was like, I called shotgun first, and I think wrestled with one of the other students over that shotgun spot that I felt I rightly deserved.
If you ever want to know the rules of shotgun, just talk to Scotty. I think he has them all memorized.
Wow.
But yeah, so a lot of fun times there. But let's talk a little bit about what took place like a couple months ago, because I know you and I talked about it over the phone about like when you guys decided to flee Ukraine to head to Slovakia.
Yeah. I know, again, that the media, the news have been reporting it for a while, this troop buildup that was happening. And, a similar thing had happened the year before, and nothing really came of it. But, the more and more that was being talked about in the news, we prepared a bit for it. We had pre-packed a suitcase, talking with Spiritual Orphans Network. They said, well, we can help you make a plan that, if Russia decided to invade, so we have mission partners in Slovakia. They would be happy to host you. And so we just kind of had a roughly plan. I just knew that if something happened, I'd start driving to Slovakia. We had the pre-packed suitcase. And in fact, the night before the invasion happened, I had actually filled up 3 gas canisters with fuel and put them in the garage. And so I could just remember waking up February 24th at like 4:20 in the morning to some pretty loud explosions, and just kind of that instant sinking feeling in your stomach, and just it's starting. And I remember messaging Pastor Kostya, and he's like, yeah, it's starting. And we had that plan. And so we began trying to, gather our stuff. And, it's one thing to have a plan, but then like to actually execute it while all this is going on was kind of a different story. We had talked to Lena's parents. They didn't want to leave. They had done it before, and their heart was just to stay this time. And they had said they would come and take our dog and watch him. We knew we couldn't take him to Slovakia with us just because of the rules with animals and things, and having chips and rabies shots. It was really complicated. So I just remember needing to load up the car, wanted to take him out to use the restroom because I didn't know how many hours it would take for her parents to come over. And I just opened the front door, and for like 4 something in the morning, it was just kind of unnaturally light outside. And I think I had gotten like 1 step outside when it was just probably the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. This explosion and just the windows just rattling, every car alarm in our neighborhood going off. And I think I just like immediately just turned around and went right back inside.
Wow.
And
just can't imagine what that.
Like I had all this stuff, the suitcases, my dog, like, in my head, I'm like, okay, I need to go and put this stuff in the car. But I was having a tough time convincing my body to actually do it.
Understandable.
Step out the door and go for it. And I just remember, having the dog out there and just be like, don't take your time today, buddy. Just please get it done.
Get it done.
Let's get inside.
And because I know you're not the biggest morning person.
No. And I'd say my wife's probably even a little bit worse than me with mornings.
Ooh.
And so, it was just hard getting everything together. And but we were, hit the road at probably just before 7. And even on the way out, there was already lines of maybe 40 cars in Bila Crkva waiting to get gas.
Wow.
And as we started driving to the border, every gas station we passed, I mean, probably a line of cars, 100 cars long, just waiting to get gas. And I just remember being kind of just thankful that my tank was, 90% full. And then I had those canisters in the back. So I just kept driving past all the gas stations and never to stop at a gas station to fill up. And it took probably 15 hours, maybe 12 hours to get to the border. And then we were in line for probably another 13 hours overnight, trying to cross. And, it was just hard. My wife doesn't have a license. And like that whole night I couldn't sleep because, the line was kind of unpredictable on when it would start moving again. Sometimes it would be a few minutes and we'd move 10 feet, or sometimes it would be, 30 seconds and we're moving another car length. And once we finally did cross, then it was another maybe 3-hour drive to get to where we were staying in Slovakia. So I think at that point I had been, traveling for maybe 28 hours without sleeping. And I had literally no idea. I didn't know hardly anything about Slovakia. I mean, I knew the capital was Bratislava, but that's it. And so I had no idea we were driving up to the mountains. And like this whole time, it's like, I know we're getting close. GPS says we're getting close, and you're just going higher and higher up the mountains. And I mean, it was just, incredibly gorgeous scenery, but it was hard to enjoy when you had been, on the road for so long. But I kept thinking as we were driving, I kept thinking, I think Psalm 121, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord.
How perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine.
And that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the sense of relief you guys probably felt once you crossed into that border into Slovakia.
Yeah. I just, remember, especially as we kind of got more like into the mountains in Western Ukraine, thinking, okay, I know we're safe, but, just imagine like if they took the capital, I don't know, could they close the borders? Well, what's going to happen? And so when we finally got out, it was a huge relief.
Right. And so you've been there now since end of February, so a handful of months. And so what have you been up to doing in Slovakia? I know you were a lot going to the border, still bringing in refugees from Ukraine.
Yeah, because so this youth center can house about 60 people. And it had been empty for probably since COVID. Like they still haven't been able to have camps here. And so, talked to Pastor Vlado, who is the director of this youth center. And, he said, we would love to be able to host refugees here. And, at that time, we just knew so many people from Bila Cerkva who were wanting to leave. And so, it kind of started with one of our volunteers from camp, Hannah, coming, in a car alone with her cat and kind of meeting her near the border. And she stayed a few nights with us and then went on to a family that she knew in like Denmark. And then we had some international students from Bila Cerkva and elsewhere in Ukraine. So they were from Africa, but had been studying in Bila Cerkva. And so they stayed with us until they went on to Germany. And it just kind of probably the first 2 weeks, it was mostly people that needed somewhere to stay for a few nights till kind of clear their head. And then, they wanted to get on to, a family or someone they knew to live with in Europe. And then probably, so I just remember getting very little sleep those first few nights because we were constantly driving to the border, picking people up, helping them, people arriving at all kinds of, weird times. But then we knew there would be people that really had no plan, even if they kind of said, oh, yeah, we're coming. We're going to go stay with these people or this family. They'd get here and, well, actually, I guess we can't stay there. And so knew that there'd be some people that need some more like kind of a permanent place to stay and be a big time commitment. And so we have had people that have been here for 90 days now, that have been living in the center, helping them find work, find jobs, find apartments. And probably we've had over 200 people that we've helped stay here in the center, find places to go. And that's just here, one village over, there's another center that has 40 Ukrainians in it right now. And so, I know these Lutheran churches in Slovakia have been helping a whole lot. And again, we began like Sergey, people we knew were coming from Bila Tserkva. We've had people who come from the east where the fighting had been, really, really terrible. Families that spent like a whole month and have been able to leave. There's just been some of that. I've volunteered at the border and met people who've lost their apartments that got hit by rockets. So it's been hard to see that and just how devastating this war has been on these families. But also, encouraged by just how the church has stepped up and how have helped take care of us, but also, family and people we know. My mother-in-law and our dog were finally able to join us here after a few weeks. So was, so thankful to the Lord for that.
Yeah, I know that was a great video seeing Jack and you reunite.
Yeah, it took him a second to figure out who I was again, and then he was pretty happy to see us.
Yeah, and even God bless what Lena was doing, because I know there's times where we were talking, you were saying how she was going back and forth over the border to give supplies and help people out, and what a brave person Lena was to be willing to do such a thing.
Yeah, she has been, amazing. She works so hard, helping out here in the center, helping every time we get new people in or people are leaving, changing bed sheets and, doing laundry and cleaning things. And she was the main person communicating between the Slovakian staff who runs the center and the Ukrainians. Nobody on the Slovak staff spoke any Ukrainian.
Wow.
And only two of them could speak English. And so they would speak English to my wife, and she would speak Ukrainian to the staff. And I would help interpret as well. But I would say probably the majority of that work was on her. And so I know, especially those first few weeks, it was exhausting.
So were you guys doing all the food preparation for all your visitors, or is that part of what the staff did?
Yeah, that's the staff is cooking the meals. I think we were helping, set the tables, clean all the dishes and some of that stuff. We weren't maybe prepping the meals, but we were helping kind of with the other stuff, the pre-setup and then clean up afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And I know also it was pretty cool is like partnering with Lutheran Church Charities and sending Joan and Kathy over to help do some service over there with you guys, which was pretty awesome that we could connect you guys with them.
Yeah, and it was great. I got to go and I took them to the border, and they worked at the border and kind of got to see firsthand what it was like for these refugees who are just leaving everything behind and coming with just a suitcase. And I've had a chance to be there at that border, and again, I know that they just really had huge hearts to help, and we're thankful to have them here in the center helping out, as well as being able to help out at the border.
I was thinking as you were getting ready to, you were in that long line to cross the border. How, in your mind, you must have been thinking, okay, probably turn the car off for a while. And then, like, when it's ready to move 10 feet, start the car. And, like, you're thinking, do I have enough fuel? And, you had that backup. Were you ever in a moment where you're in that long line thinking, oh, man, we're running out of fuel?
Definitely was, because I just had no idea. Is this going to be 5 hours to get across? Are we going to be here for a few days? we just didn't know. And so, yeah, it was definitely a lot of turning the car off and almost falling asleep, and then we're moving again.
Wow.
So I was nervous, but was thankful that we ended up, having plenty.
Good.
So we probably, when we crossed out of the border, we still had more than half a tank of gas.
And were the gas lines as long once you got into Slovakia?
No, once we're in Slovakia, it seemed normal. It was easy to get gas.
Well, what a refuge Slovakia is, because like with all the influx of people, you use that word, things were normal. Like it's like something you really needed after that treacherous journey. Just to find something that was normal.
And as much as we needed it, I just know that these families who've come after us, who, we dealt with one morning, they dealt with weeks or even months
Right.
of living through much worse, of shelling and attacks and constant air sirens. And so you really could see it in their faces. Some people just needed 3 or 4 days of quiet just before they could even, kind of start to think normally again and really, okay, I can kind of make decisions about my future now. And it was heartbreaking because we had kids with special needs here. Some of the kids that come to our camp, children with cerebral palsy, and just something as simple as the turning on the ventilation in the bathroom, like the air fan. And he was like, Mom, sirens.
Oh, wow.
And Mom would have to say, no, it's fine. And something is a loud bang, and you could just see people, they were jumping. The kids would kind of jump at any noise. You could see just how much effect that had on the children, let alone also the adults were pretty shook up. I know when the rocket strikes attack Bila Turkva, I mean, probably one landed maybe 200 yards, 300 yards from where my mother-in-law was in the church.
Wow.
And I mean, as loud as whatever I heard that morning, I'm sure it's just nothing could compare to what she heard. And I just can imagine, that fear. And so, and just how heartbreaking that was to me to see that on her face, and, kind of seeing how much time she needed before she felt a little bit more at peace.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that must have been really hard for them to get to that point of decision to leave, because you had expressed how they were just going to stay because it was their home. And, after living there probably so long of their life, to come to that moment to say it's time to go, and all of the feelings and emotions, not only in that decision, but in the act of leaving, must have been really difficult.
It was, it was a lot of nights of writing and prayers with like Sergei really struggled. It felt like he would be, kind of abandoning his country if he left.
Mm-hmm.
The same with our mother-in-law, and probably the hardest one. We were dealing with a lady. I worked with her for 5 years at God's Hidden Treasures. Her name's Olga, and she was the cook there. So, of course, she's really special to me because she fed me for 5 years. But, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had been on chemotherapy. And just for her trying to make that decision, I want to leave, but do I leave now? And I'm afraid I get to Slovakia or somewhere in Europe, and they say, no, we can't continue your treatment. We need to have our doctors examine you. And then she misses her chemo. and it just totally ruins her treatment? Or do I wait until I've had my chemo and then go and make that crazy, possibly 30-hour journey to go to a foreign country and then try to get treatment? And will there be treatment? And
Right.
I talked with Pastor Vlado about it, and he was able to find a doctor he knew who found a cancer treatment center here in Slovakia where they would treat her for free. She actually stayed with one of the doctor's families. But just to see her and go through that prayer and that decision, where she's going to leave her husband with her 2 children, who are, one's maybe 4 years old, the other daughter's maybe 9 years old, and a family friend who would help watch the kids while she's getting her chemo, and she ended up having the double mastectomy here in Slovakia. It's just heartbreaking. You don't think about that. When you imagine the refugees and people leaving, you just don't think about, what about those people in wheelchairs? What about the people who are on dialysis? What about people who are in chemotherapy? How much more that becomes a struggle. Can I leave? Do I stay?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've dealt with that with a man on dialysis where, he has to have it every 2 days. Can I get to the foreign country in that time? But what if the hospital here gets bombed and I can't get treatment anymore? It's, that's a death sentence for him. And so, I'm just so thankful that, again, that really, I think God put us in the right place, that the church has had resources to help people find quickly, like, the place they need to go to continue their treatment.
Yeah, man. Just listening to you, Scott, I love hearing all these stories and the personal stories that you're sharing here. And I'm just kind of thinking, what are your future plans with like serving there, and where you see maybe this going in the next few months, or any like future plans to kind of, as we start to wrap up here?
I know Biela Crkva is now, in the Kyiv region. It's become more safe, at least that, the army kind of Russian army left, and now they're really focusing on the east. There's still air sirens, there's still rocket attacks and stuff that can really happen anywhere. But I know there are families here that are really struggling with that. Do we go home now? And trying to provide wisdom for them, pastoral care for them. I mean, I really feel committed, at least through the middle of summer, with the families that are here that I know aren't going to go back, that are going to try to stay in Slovakia. The ones that were in some of the places that Russia occupied, where, I mean, those towns have just been laid waste to. Like every day I take one of the kids. He is he's been diagnosed with autism.
Okay.
And again, he lived with his mom and brother in a basement for over a month.
Oh.
In that constant shelling and stuff. And we're helping take him and picking him up from kindergarten every day, while his mom was able to get a job at a sewing factory here. And at least during this time of probation for her, she has to work at a time where she can't take him to kindergarten. So, we feel committed, and there are, we're having church services with 50 Ukrainian refugees on Sundays. And there's going to be camps in Slovakia for youth, and there are going to be Ukrainian teenagers that are refugees coming to those camps. So I think, I really feel a commitment there. And so I think at least to mid-July, we'll be serving here in Slovakia, and then it'll kind of be that when the camps are over, decision time. Okay, are we ready to go home back to Biela Crkva? And we'll know there'll be a lot of internally displaced people, and there'll be, ministry and help that we can do there. But I know we're already helping there because, again, men couldn't leave the country. So Lena's dad is there. We know lots of men there that we've been able to get funds to, and they're helping pastors in the area that are helping take food to shut-ins and things like that. But, so that's a struggle for me on when is that right time to go back to Ukraine.
Right.
And so you probably have some contacts back there who can kind of say, oh, the condition of your home is still intact kind of thing, right? Like, because it would be hard to make that decision without really knowing. Like, is it still there? Is home still there?
Yeah, thankfully, I mean, again, Lena's dad and her brother couldn't leave because men can't leave the country.
Oh, okay.
So, they've checked up on our house. It's still there.
And your house, what? You just had it built like a year or two ago?
Yeah. We just moved in, I think, probably maybe April 2020 or May 2020. And it wasn't finished being built, but there was enough that we could live there. So we were still, doing repairs and help trying to finish it. But we're thankful that it's there. It's standing. Nobody's broken into it as far as we know. Every week or two, Lena's dad goes and checks on it for us. So, and I know that there's still air sirens and those things and threats of rocket attacks, but it's definitely calmer than it was 2 months ago. So as I talk to my friends in Bila Tserkva and kind of knowing the situation, I understand why there are families that are thinking about going back, because it's really hard to be a refugee and live in a foreign country. And, there's so many families that that's just a struggle. They know that there's probably no future for them in Europe. There's just no way for them to make enough money to ever afford houses here in like Slovakia. I mean, the housing cost is much more expensive than in Ukraine. And just kind of everything's on the euro here, which is, things are just much more expensive than it was for these families in Ukraine.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. So kind of wrapping up here, how can people help support, or what do you need prayers for?
Yeah, definitely prayers for those who are here that just don't have that a safety net, that don't have a family to go to, don't have that kind of help. Those people that I think are going to be a long-term commitment to being able to live here in Slovakia and thrive. Finding apartments or housing or finding the job situations. Prayers for those who wisdom when is the right time to go home. If people are looking to support, I know a Spiritual Orphans Network. The website is Sun Network, SONETWORK.org. That they have a Ukraine relief fund that's again helping that helps provide all the meals for people that are living here in the center, helping pay for apartments for families that need it. We have again the kids in wheelchairs that are here. We had to find handicap accessible apartments for them, helping students get things that they need to continue their studies while here in Slovakia, and it is also helping families still in Ukraine, again, as we have pastors and that are there and bringing food to people and serving and driving people to the border. I know that, again, that kind of support, it's going a long way right now.
Okay, good stuff there. And before we wrap up with a prayer, I want to share kind of a fun story that we had before we started to record here, because PDubs noticed your shirt. And you shared an interesting story about your shirt and what it says on there and why you have that shirt.
I got a black and orange shirt. It just a big orange letter says Nebraska
but you're not, middle of it. You're not from Nebraska. Have you ever lived in Nebraska?
No, I have never lived in Nebraska. I think I'd only visited it maybe twice. The Omaha area.
Visiting
I think
Buzz?
I was saying, yeah, our friend, one of our seminary friends, Justin Bell, is a pastor there. But I packed that suitcase probably a month before we, ended up the war started and we left the country. We were prepping that we knew it was a possibility that Russia would invade. We wanted to stay, so it was unless Russia tries a full-out invasion to take the whole country, we were planning to stay. But we were prepared, and I'd put some T-shirts and things into that suitcase, and I think I at the time was thinking, it's probably not going to happen. So I just took like my least favorite clothes, the things that I don't really wear anymore, and just emergency stuff, put them in that suitcase. And so when I got here to Slovakia, I'm looking at all these clothes, and I'm like, I don't want to wear any of this. And so I went to the only kind of store I could find that had extra large sizes in Slovakia here. And just got this. They had all these generic T-shirts. Like I got a Nebraska one that says Arizona, one that says like New Mexico. So that's my new wardrobe.
Were you able to find one that said Delaware?
Delaware.
Hi, we're in Delaware.
No way.
Well, like when you think of like hot tourist spots of the United States, Nebraska. Let's go to Nebraska. Take the family to Nebraska. Or like New Mexico is very thriving. It's kind of funny. Well, those Nebraskans, they got a good football team.
Right.
But apparently, it's funny because there's been a couple other refugees that have come here, and they have the exact same shirts.
A lot of Cornhusker fans there.
They found the same store. So, and what made it kind of sad is she's a lady. So I feel like I got the girly shirt on.
Well, like I said, just find a shirt that says you're in Delaware.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to close this out here with a prayer, Scotty, and pray for you, Lena, and all that's going on there, okay?
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So, dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time to have Scotty on our podcast here to share about his experiences serving in Ukraine and being a refugee to Slovakia, Lord. We just thank you for the safety that you've given to Scotty, Lena, and all those that they've been able to serve, Lord. We just thank you for their servant's heart and just their willingness and to make an impact on those who have just had their life flipped upside down, Lord. We just ask you to continue to be with Scotty and Lena in their ministry and what they're doing in Slovakia, and grant wisdom to Scotty and all those kind of trying to figure out when is the right time to go back, Lord. So grant them your wisdom. Be with those trying to just sort out their life, figuring out where to go now in this war-torn world that they're living in with Ukraine and finding refugees, Lord. And we just ask you to continue with be with Scotty in his ministry there, that he can continue to make that great impact that he has already made serving in Ukraine and Slovakia, Lord. We pray this all in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, Scotty, I thank you for sharing, all of the personal, the daily, the in the moment experiences that you faced, you and Lena and your family, and that others, refugees, are facing. As you described it to us, to me, it reminded me of the book of the Acts of the Apostles. It's like, here's what we did, and here's where we went, and here's what we encountered, and it shows everything. And thank you for drawing us in to really get a better picture of what everyone's experiencing over there.
Well, thank you, Pastor Warren, and again, thank you for having me on the podcast. And I really do appreciate all the prayers and support from your congregation. And again, it was fun to catch up with Donald.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you, Scotty. And, next time you're in the States, especially in the Chicago area, we'd love to have you come and talk at Emmanuel so people can see you face to face and get to see what a great person you are and what a servant's heart you have.
Well, it sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I'll take you out to some good food out here.
And when you come,
All right.
wear your Nebraska shirt.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, Scotty, so much for taking this time. And thank you for everybody listening, and God's blessings.